Under the dying moonlight, Merchant Darius pressed his trembling hands into the cold soil, burying a small chest heavy with gold coins. His breath came in sharp whispers, as though the night itself might overhear. Behind him, the old house loomed, silent, except for the creak of the wind through its cracked windows. "No one must ever find this," he muttered, eyes darting toward the servants' quarters. But unseen, a faint glow flickered behind a curtain. Someone was awake. What happens when a lie becomes the only truth you live in? Is wealth worth losing your soul or your peace? Darius wiped the dirt from his hands and forced a calm breath, whispering to the earth, "Now you belong to me alone." Yet his whisper carried fear, not triumph. A step sounded in the darkness, soft, deliberate. He froze. The scene ended with Darius clutching his lantern tight, turning toward the sound. Someone was watching. Morning came gray and heavy. Darius walked among his servants with a calm smile, as if nothing had been buried under the garden's roots the night before. Yet his eyes lingered too long on every hand, every glance, searching for guilt that wasn't there. Rafi bowed silently when Darius passed, but his gaze flickered toward the garden, reading its hidden language. The air between them thickened. Master and servant, both pretending not to know. Darius' voice broke the silence. "I trust my men. I always have." But the tremor beneath his words betrayed him. At breakfast, Darius barely touched his food. His fingers drummed the table's edge while Rafi poured his tea in silence. The sound of liquid filling the cup felt louder than words. Darius forced a smile. "You slept well, Rafi?" he asked. Rafi nodded. "Yes, master. And you?" Darius' eyes searched his face, looking for signs of deceit that didn't exist. For the first time, Rafi noticed the merchant's trembling hand. Fear had already begun to eat him. Later that day, Mara, the maid, carried laundry through the back garden. Her foot brushed against uneven soil near the old fig tree. She paused. The ground felt too soft. Darius' voice suddenly barked from behind. "Leave that!" She froze. His anger came too quickly, too loud. Her eyes darted toward the disturbed earth, then back to his pale, sweating face. Something inside her shifted. From that moment, the merchant's secret no longer belonged only to him. That night, Rafi lay awake, watching the ceiling shadows tremble with candlelight. He heard Darius pacing above him, the sound of boots crossing the same spot again and again. Fear had changed its owner. The lie that was meant to protect the merchant's gold had begun to guard something else. His sanity. Rafi whispered to himself, "A man who hides his treasure starts to lose sight of what's already his." He closed his eyes not to sleep but to plan. The next morning, Darius ordered all his servants to gather in the courtyard. His tone was calm, almost gentle, yet something sharp hid behind each word. "Last night," he began, "someone entered the garden." The servants glanced at one another, confused, afraid. Rafi stood still, his expression unreadable. Darius' eyes swept over every face, searching for guilt where there was only silence. "I am not accusing," he continued, "but I must be certain my trust is deserved." A lie slipped easily from his lips, and it tasted like rust. He told them a single coin had gone missing. The truth was, it hadn't. He just wanted to see who flinched. All morning, Darius watched them work. His gaze followed Rafi's hands as he swept the hall, followed Mara's steps as she carried bread to the pantry. Every sound, the drop of a coin, the scrape of a shovel, made him flinch. The fear of losing what he'd hidden was turning him into the thief of his own peace. At one point, he caught his reflection in the mirror, eyes hollow, shoulders stiff. For the first time, he looked less like a merchant and more like a man haunted by his own secret. By noon, Darius decided to test his servants further. He placed a small purse of coins on the edge of the fountain and pretended to forget it. From his study window, he watched, one by one, the servants passed by. No one touched it. When Rafi approached, he stopped for a moment, then simply adjusted the purse so it wouldn't fall into the water and kept walking. Darius frowned. His plan had failed to expose guilt, but something inside him whispered, perhaps goodness was the greater threat. When evening fell, Darius called Rafi to his chamber. "You've been here long," he said, his tone falsely kind. "You're loyal, aren't you?" Rafi nodded. "I serve as best I can." Darius leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If another servant hides something from me, you'll tell me, won't you?" Rafi met his eyes, steady, calm, fearless. "If you trust your servants," he said softly, "you'll have nothing to fear." For a heartbeat, Darius' mask slipped. The young man's words struck like truth, too sharp to ignore. That night, the house grew unbearably quiet. Even the waves outside seemed to whisper lies. Darius could no longer sleep. He lit his lantern and walked to the garden, his heart pounding. The soil looked untouched, yet he felt watched. Behind a curtain, Rafi stood awake again, just like before. Their lives had become mirrors, each man studying the other through the veil of night. And as Darius stared at the earth, he thought he saw it move. His mind screamed a question that refused to rest. Was his treasure still safe? Or was he the one already stolen? By morning, Darius had made a plan. He told the servants he would travel to the next town for trade, but it was a lie. He wanted to see who would act when he was gone. He left through the front gate, waited beyond the wall, and watched. Hours passed. No one entered the garden, yet the silence itself became unbearable. His own deceit began to feel like a trap closing around him. Rafi, meanwhile, worked steadily, glancing once at the gate and smiling faintly. Perhaps he already knew the truth. From his hiding place, Darius saw nothing suspicious. No stolen glance, no wandering step. His heart twisted between relief and disappointment. He needed to prove his fears right, even if it meant inventing guilt. By noon, he returned pretending to be tired from travel. "Did all go well in my absence?" he asked. "Yes, master," Rafi replied softly. "The house remains as you left it." Darius smiled, but it was hollow. He knew Rafi's words carried another meaning. "It is you who are not as you were." That evening, Darius spread fine flour across the garden path. An invisible trap. "If anyone walks here tonight," he whispered, "I'll see their footprints by morning." He returned to his room, heart pounding like thunder, but he didn't sleep. He watched the window for hours, waiting. When dawn came, he rushed outside. The path was clean, except for his own footprints leading to the buried spot, and back again. The truth hit him like a blow. No one had touched his gold. His own fear had. At breakfast, his servants spoke quietly among themselves. Darius listened from behind the door, catching fragments. Words like restless, fear, strange, rage boiled in his chest. When he entered, their voices fell silent. He smiled too wide and said, "Eat well. You've earned it." Then he watched them. Every movement, every bite. But in the silence of his gaze, Rafi lifted his head and met his eyes. It was not defiance, only truth reflected without fear, and that truth burned brighter than any coin. That night, the merchant's paranoia reached its peak. He carried his lantern to the garden once more. But this time, he dug up the chest. The sound of iron scraping soil echoed through the stillness. Rafi awoke to the faint rhythm and looked out from his window, realizing the truth. Darius wasn't protecting his treasure anymore. He was fighting his own mind. As the chest rose from the ground, gold glimmered through the dirt like false hope. Darius clutched it, whispering, "You're safe now." But the look in his eyes said otherwise. The more he held, the less he had. Morning arrived, pale and silent. Darius sat at his desk, the unearthed chest beside him, gold coins glinting like tiny suns. Yet none of them warmed him. He had moved the treasure inside his chamber for safety, but his eyes darted toward the door every few seconds. When Rafi entered with tea, Darius quickly covered the chest with a cloth. "It's dusting day," Rafi said calmly. "Shall I clean the study too?" Darius hesitated, then nodded, his hand trembling. The lie had become too heavy to hide. As Rafi dusted the shelves, he noticed faint soil clinging to the carpet near the desk, the same color as the garden earth. He said nothing. Instead, he paused near the window and looked outside where the ground now stood, freshly dug and uneven. "Strange," he murmured softly, almost to himself. "The garden looks as if it's been disturbed." Darius froze. "You imagine things," he snapped. Rafi only smiled gently. "Perhaps," he said, bowing before leaving the room. His calmness was the sharpest blade of all. That evening, Mara entered Rafi's small room, carrying folded linens. Her voice trembled. "He's growing worse," she whispered. "He stares at shadows, accuses us with his eyes." Rafi nodded, calm and thoughtful. "Fear feeds itself," he said. "When a man lies too long, the truth starts to whisper louder." She looked at him with worry. "Then what will you do?" Rafi's answer came like a quiet storm. "Nothing. He will reveal himself." Unable to bear the silence, Darius decided to test Rafi's loyalty. He called him after supper, holding a small gold coin between his fingers. "Take this," he said softly, "for your honesty." Rafi looked at the coin, then at his master. "I serve without payment beyond what's due." Darius' smile wavered. "You refuse gold?" Rafi nodded. "Only what I have not earned." For a moment, the candlelight between them flickered like truth itself, bright, dangerous, and impossible to hide. That night, Darius could not sleep. He sat beside the chest, its lid open, gold shimmering under lantern light. "They all want it," he muttered to himself, even the quiet one. His eyes darted toward the door, expecting footsteps that never came. Hours passed. At last he clutched a handful of coins, whispering, "I trust no one." Outside, unseen, Rafi watched through a crack in the door. His expression held neither greed nor triumph, only sadness. He finally understood. The treasure had already buried its master. The morning after, the house felt colder. Darius sat at the breakfast table, the servants whispering softly behind him. The gold chest now stayed locked beside his chair, a silent, glittering guardian. His eyes darted from one servant to another, expecting betrayal in every breath. Rafi served him tea without a word. The clink of the cup on the saucer sounded like judgment. "Did you sleep, master?" Rafi asked gently. Darius forced a smile. "Gold never sleeps, so why should I?" But the look in his eyes said something else. He hadn't rested in days. Not from exhaustion, but from fear. By midday, Darius started hearing things. The sound of coins shifting in the chest, faint and metallic, even though no one had touched them. He flung the lid open. Nothing moved. Still, the sound persisted in his mind. He stormed into the servants' quarters, shouting, "Who's been in my room?" The servants stared in fear. None spoke. Rafi stepped forward calmly. "No one entered, master?" "Perhaps the noise is from within," Darius glared. "Within what?" Rafi's gaze didn't move. "Within yourself." For the first time, Darius couldn't speak. His own silence was louder than truth. That night, Darius began setting new traps. Threads tied across doorways, powder scattered before the chest, even a cup balanced on the lid. His paranoia had turned the house into a prison. Rafi watched quietly as his master descended into obsession. The old merchant no longer cared for trade, for sleep, or even for food. His world had shrunk to the size of a chest. In silence, Rafi began writing a letter, not of accusation, but of mercy, to remind the merchant of who he once was before the gold consumed him. The next morning, Rafi handed the folded letter to Mara. "Leave it where he'll find it," he said quietly. "Then say nothing." Hours later, Darius discovered it on his desk. The paper was simple, the handwriting calm. It read, "Gold is safest when a man no longer fears losing it. You've already buried yourself deeper than the chest." His hands shook as he read it. His pride told him to burn it, but his heart trembled. For a fleeting second, he saw himself clearly, a man imprisoned by the very thing he once commanded. That night, Darius sat by the window, the letter beside him, the chest open but untouched. He looked at the sea beyond the cliffs, hearing only the endless hum of waves. For the first time in years, he didn't count his coins. He whispered, "What's left of a man when his gold owns him?" Below, Rafi stood in the courtyard, looking up at the same window. Their eyes met across the distance, one filled with guilt, the other with compassion. The storm inside Darius had only begun, but the wind had shifted. His downfall had a new name: truth. Just before dawn, a violent noise broke the mansion's silence. Darius tearing through drawers, shouting at shadows. "I've taken it," he cried. His voice cracked against the stone walls. The servants rushed to his door. He stood pale and trembling, the chest overturned, coins scattered across the floor like broken stars. "No one leaves this house," he roared. Rafi entered quietly, eyes calm. "Who has wronged you, master?" Darius pointed at him, shaking. "You know." Rafi looked at the scattered gold and whispered, "Then why is it all still here?" Darius sank to his knees, his breath short and uneven. The servants backed away, afraid to speak. He clutched at the coins, trying to gather them, but his hands shook too much. "Someone moved them," he whispered. "Someone touched what was mine." Rafi knelt beside him slowly. "You've guarded this gold so fiercely," he said gently, "that even your fear began guarding it too." Darius looked up, eyes wild. "You mock me." Rafi shook his head. "No, master. I pity you." The words struck harder than any accusation. Later that day, Darius ordered every room searched, every drawer opened. He shouted commands no one understood. The mansion filled with noise, doors slamming, furniture scraping, frightened footsteps echoing through the halls. Rafi followed quietly, saying nothing. Finally, Darius tore down the curtains in his study, screaming, "Show yourselves!" But the only thing revealed was his own reflection in the mirror. Pale, shaking, unrecognizable. He stared at himself for a long, terrible moment and whispered, "Thief." By sunset, exhaustion had hollowed him out. Darius stumbled into the courtyard, clutching the chest now filled again with coins. "If I bury it once more, they won't find it," he muttered. The servants watched from the doorway as he dragged the heavy box toward the garden. Rafi stepped forward. "Master, leave it. There's nothing left to steal." Darius glared at him. "Everything can be stolen?" Rafi's voice softened. "Even peace?" The merchant stopped mid-step. The wind carried silence, the most painful answer of all. Darkness fell. Darius dug again beneath the fig tree, the same spot where the lie was first born. His hands bled, but he didn't stop. The gold inside the chest shimmered like something alive. Behind him, Rafi stood silently, lantern in hand. "Let it rest," he said quietly. Darius turned, eyes glistening with tears and madness. "It's mine." Rafi took a slow breath. "Then keep it. But remember what it's taken from you." For a moment, Darius froze. His hands loosened. The lantern light trembled. The lie was finally naked under the moon. The garden was still when dawn came. Darius sat beside the open hole, the gold chest half buried again. His hands hung limp, covered in soil and regret. The sun rose slowly, spilling pale light over his weary face. Rafi approached quietly. Neither spoke for a long time. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Darius whispered, "I don't know what I was trying to protect anymore." Ruffy looked at the rising sun. "Perhaps something you already lost." In that moment, the merchant realized the truth. He had buried not treasure, but trust. As the day brightened, the servants gathered in silence at the garden's edge. No one dared speak. Darius rose slowly, every movement heavy, like a man carrying years of guilt. He turned to Ruffy and said, "You saw everything. You could have taken it." Ruffy nodded once. "I could have." Darius frowned. "Why didn't you?" Ruffy looked at the soil, calm and steady, "Because what you feared losing was never yours to begin with." The words hung in the air. Gentle, merciless, true. Inside the mansion, Darius sat at his desk for the last time. He opened his ledger, the pages filled with numbers, debts, and deals. None of it mattered now. He reached for a pen but couldn't write. His hand hovered, then fell. Through the window he saw Ruffy leading the other servants to breakfast. They laughed softly, something he hadn't heard in weeks. He whispered, "So this is what peace looks like." In the stillness he felt the faintest relief, the sound of a chain breaking, unseen but real. By afternoon, Darius walked to the garden once more. He lifted the chest, heavy yet meaningless, and carried it to the cliff that overlooked the sea. Ruffy followed but said nothing. The waves crashed below, endless and calm. Darius opened the chest one last time. The sunlight caught the coins, turning them almost white. Without a word, he tilted the chest and let them fall, a stream of light cascading into the ocean. Each coin struck the water like a confession. As the last coin vanished into the waves, Darius turned to Ruffy. His face was calm now, not rich, not powerful, just human. "You were right," he said softly. "Peace was the only treasure I lost." Ruffy nodded. "And the only one you can still find." Darius looked toward the horizon, the wind tugging at his robe. For the first time, he smiled without fear. The sea roared beneath them, swallowing gold and lies alike. And in the silence that followed, the world felt honest again.